Hi, I'm Joel Weinberger. I'm a partner in Implicit Strategies. I'm also a research and clinical psychologist, and I'm going to talk about unconscious influences on consumer behavior, both in terms of associative networks and emotions. I'm going to begin with talking about the traditional methods and how they're limited, and why we need these unconscious measures. Consumers will be happy to tell you why they behave as they do, but often they're not really aware of why they do what they do. We're not the rational individuals we believe that we are. We don't really know that, let alone like to admit it. What that means is that we can't rely entirely on what people say when you ask them about their preferences for a product or whether they like an ad or how they're likely to behave. And it's very simple. You can't ask them to report consciously about a process that's unconscious. What psychological science, neuroscience, and cognitive science have indicated are that the mind and the brain, and those are parallel structures, are organized in terms of networks of associations. That's one. And two, that the first reaction we have to any experience is an emotional one, positive or negative, what we can call a gut level emotional reaction. And just to repeat, we're typically not aware of these things. They are unconscious. What does that mean? Well, what it means is when you're trying to deliver a message to your consumers, one thing you want to know, the first thing you want to know is what are the associations that your message or your brand or whatever it is you're presenting activates in the consumers, in your respondents. Then you want to know, given what's already going on, what is it you'd like to activate with your advertising, with your message? And just as importantly, what would you like to deactivate? And then the important question, how do you get there from here, meaning how do you get from where you are to where you'd like to be? And secondly, what emotion does your message currently elicit in your respondents, and what is it you'd like it to elicit? So how do we get there? What do we do? To measure unconscious associative networks, we use reaction time measures, and I'm going to talk about that, what I mean by that in a minute. And to get at emotional reactions, the gut level reaction I mentioned, we use responses to stimulation, words, images presented unconsciously. And just as important, what we need is an environment that makes this practical. And that environment is the internet, in the case of the research I'm going to be talking about, because you can get large numbers of people and thereby do sophisticated statistical analyses and segment the population. Let's start with the reaction time measures that get you implicit associative networks. Whatever's on your mind, whatever's on our minds, whether it's always there, chronically there, or whether it was just activated recently by a message, grabs your attention. You can't help it, and it happens unconsciously. Knowing that is the key. That's what gives us access to consumers' associations, to brands, ads, logos, whatever, any kind of message. And I'm going to illustrate it with a simple test. It was originally called the Stroop test. You see a word there. What color is that word printed in? Simple. The answer is red. Not so simple. What color is the next word printed in? Now the answer is blue. The word, however, is red, and that slows you down for just a tiny fraction of a second, milliseconds, thousandths of a second, but it's measurable. It turns out that that works not just with colors, but with any stimulus that's resonating with you, any stimulus that's on your mind. That is, if it's on your mind, it will slow you down. So, how do we apply this technique? How do we make use of it? Well, we present a message, either early on in the process, a storyboard, an animatic, or late in the process. A promo, a logo, a cover of a magazine, a finished ad. And we work with experts in that message, whether they be brand managers or the creatives, to identify a set of words or short phrases that they believe and hope are triggered by the message, or that they hope are not triggered by the message but might be. Present those words or short phrases in color, and then the task is to ignore the word and click on the color. If the word's been activated by the message, it's going to slow you down. In the example here, the correct answer is green, but the word is exciting, and therefore will slow you down if exciting is on your mind. Now for the emotional part. What you see, what you don't see can affect you. Before I get into this, I have to kind of debunk a couple of myths, because we're using stimulation that people are not aware of seeing, often called subliminal stimulation, which has a whole mythology attached to it. What it cannot do is control your mind, make you dance like a chicken, make you drink Coca-Cola or eat popcorn. That's not what it does. But people do register all kinds of stimulation outside of awareness, unconsciously. And their first reaction to that stimulation is an emotional one, which gives us a very powerful tool for assessing emotional reactions to your message, be it a product, an ad, a logo, tagline, or whatever. Here's what we do concretely. The respondent looks at a screen and focuses on its center where there's an X. Then a stimulus or some image is presented for a fraction of a second. They're not aware of seeing it. Immediately afterwards, a stimulus is presented that they are aware of seeing. It's there for a second or two. And then they're asked a series of questions about the stimulus that they did see. They think they're responding to the conscious stimulus, the one that they saw, but the unconscious stimulus, the one that was presented very quickly, will bias their reaction and will have an assessment of how they feel about the unconscious stimulus. Now, I'm going to provide an example. And the reason I'm presenting this one is this is a study that we did where the unconscious reactions and the conscious reactions conflicted. And I'm going to explain how this can happen and what happened in this particular case. Now, they don't have to conflict. Sometimes they're coordinate. But I think it's more interesting when they do conflict. In this case, Millward Brown, which is an advertising research company, asked us to evaluate or help them evaluate a tricky ad for Skoda, which is a car. Many of you are probably aware of it because you're in Europe, but I was not, being in the U.S. I know you can't tell from my accent. It's produced by Volkswagen. Among other things, the Skoda people and Millward Brown people were interested in whether the ad promoted positive emotional responses to the car. So what we did was we presented the ad on the internet to a couple of hundred respondents, and then we gave them our two tests, the tests for associative networks, the implicit networks test, and the test for implicit emotions, the implicit emotions tests. I'm not going to run the ad, but what you see doesn't look like a car ad. What it is, it was an ad where a car was made out of cake, essentially. So it was an odd ad. It was innovative, and that's why they were interested in finding out what happened. Okay, here are the results of Millward Brown's link, which is one of the better conscious measures. I won't go into all of it. It's very complicated and detailed, but notice enjoyment is top 10%, involvement is 15%, positive emotion 10%. It's a good ad according to conscious measures. Now, let's look at our results. Without going through all the associations, I'm going to say we did not duplicate the results associatively. Instead, the associations were mixed. There were positive associations, there were negative associations, and no one was dominant. And we had a hard time making sense of it. And so we were a little bit perturbed by that. But it all came into sense when we looked at the implicit emotions test. What you have on the left is people who were presented with the Skoda logo after seeing the ad, subliminally, and what you have on the right are a control group that did not see the Skoda image. And what you see is the blue box shows that people who are under 40 had a very positive emotional reaction, whereas people who were older than 40, which is the reddish or pink box, had a negative reaction. The control group looks slightly different, but actually is statistically identical. There's no difference. So what you're finding is an age effect. And that is that people who are under 40 liked it, people who are over 40 didn't like it. And this made no sense to us. We didn't understand why this should be. But when we went back to the Millward Brown and Skoda people, they explained it to us, and it all fell into place. Skoda was originally manufactured by an Eastern European company. I believe it was a Czech company, not by Volkswagen, and wasn't a very good car. It was an inferior car. In fact, it was so bad it was the butt of jokes in Europe. Then Volkswagen took it over, remade it, and it's a well-engineered car. It's a Volkswagen. Consciously, people know that. So they say Skoda is well-built, and there you have the link results. Unconsciously, you have a different story. Those old enough to remember Skoda in a negative way, as a joke, they retained their negative associations and their negative emotional reaction to it. Gut-level reactions don't go away very easily. Think of first impressions, think of prejudices. So although people know consciously it's a good car, unconsciously they didn't. And their associations reflected that depending on their age. So here were the implications that we offered them. Either forget the older consumers, they're lost, and just markets go to the younger consumers, or make an effort to emphasize to the older consumers that this is a now well-engineered car. It's a Volkswagen. Make it explicit, talk about it a lot. In other words, it's not your grandfather's Skoda. Those were the two options, and those are practical marketing options. And that's it. Thank you very much.